Hello, and welcome back to Kookaburra, where knowledge meets inner wisdom. Today, I would like to start with something very basic, but at the same time, it may be one of the most important questions you can ever ask yourself. Who am I? At first, the answer seems obvious. You have a name, you have a body, you have a personality, you have memories, opinions, likes and dislikes, and naturally, you identify all of this as you. But is that really all you are? Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever noticed your own thoughts? Maybe you were sitting quietly and suddenly realized, why am I thinking about this? That creates an interesting question. If you can observe your thoughts, who is doing the observing? You have thoughts, but perhaps you are not your thoughts. You have emotions, but perhaps you are not your emotions either. And obviously, you have a body. But does that necessarily mean that the body is the whole of you? This is where we begin exploring consciousness. And I deliberately use the word exploring because I don't want you to simply believe what I'm telling you. Take these ideas, think about them, compare them with your own experiences, and decide for yourself what makes sense. One of the easiest ways for me to understand the relationship between consciousness and the human body is to think about an avatar. Imagine that you want to explore the bottom of the ocean. You cannot simply jump into several kilometers of deep water. The pressure would kill you. So you need a special vehicle, perhaps a sophisticated diving suit. The suit keeps you alive. It has sensors that allow you to see and hear what is happening around you. It may have a computer that processes information. But there is something very important to remember. The suit is not the person inside it. The suit is simply the vehicle that allows the person to experience an environment in which they otherwise couldn't operate. I look at the human body in a very similar way. Our physical body allows consciousness to experience this physical reality. And just like the diving suit has sensors, our human avatar has sensors as well. We call them our five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. These senses collect information from the outside world and send it to the brain. The brain then processes that information and creates our experience of the world around us. But this brings us back to our original question. Who is having that experience? Most of us grow up assuming that the brain produces everything we call consciousness: thoughts, personality, memories, awareness, everything. And from a conventional scientific point of view, there are good reasons for making that connection. Change the brain, and you can certainly change a person's experience. But whether the brain actually creates consciousness, or whether it somehow receives, filters, or interacts with consciousness, is a much bigger question. Think about a radio. If I damage the radio, the music becomes distorted. If I completely destroy it, the music stops coming from that radio. But that doesn't mean the radio created the broadcast. It was simply receiving and translating a signal. Now, I'm not saying that this proves the brain works like a radio. It doesn't. I'm simply giving you another way of looking at the relationship between the brain and consciousness. Because once we stop automatically assuming that consciousness must be produced entirely inside the brain, some very interesting possibilities begin to open. In my videos, you will often hear me use the term higher self. So let me explain what I mean by it. I use higher self to describe the deeper consciousness behind the physical personality, the part of us that I believe exists beyond the everyday ego. You can call it the soul, consciousness, inner self, or higher self. The terminology is not really important. Understanding the concept is. Your everyday personality has to deal with the physical world. It has to work, pay bills, drive a car, remember appointments, solve problems, protect itself, make decisions. That is the job of what I call the avatar. And the ego is an important part of that system. I don't consider the ego an enemy. We need it. The problem begins when the avatar starts believing that it is the whole person. It is a little bit like the diving suit suddenly deciding, there is nobody inside me. I am doing all of this myself. And that is where we can become disconnected from a much deeper part of ourselves. Our physical senses are mostly designed to collect information from the outside. We see something, we hear something, we touch something, and the brain processes that information, but we also receive information from the inside. Sometimes you suddenly know that something doesn't feel right. You meet somebody and immediately feel comfortable with them, or uncomfortable, without knowing why. An idea appears unexpectedly. You feel strongly drawn towards something, or something inside you says, "Don't do this." We usually call this intuition. I see intuition as one of the communication channels between our everyday awareness and the deeper part of our consciousness. The problem is that the outside world is very loud. Our inner communication is usually much quieter. So we become extremely good at listening outward and very poor at listening inward. There is another important part of consciousness we need to understand. We don't experience the outside world exactly as it is. We experience an interpretation of it. Let me give you a very simple example. Imagine that you have saved money all year for a beautiful beach holiday. You arrive at your destination, and it starts raining, and raining, and raining. 5 days of rain. For you, it may be a disaster. You might think, what a terrible holiday. What a waste of money. But 10 kilometers away, there may be a farmer who has experienced months of drought. For him, exactly the same rain could be the best thing that has happened all year. The rain itself hasn't changed. The meaning has. The same external event has created two completely different realities. Why? Because we don't simply experience events. We experience events through our memories, expectations, beliefs, and previous experiences. This is why consciousness is so important. Your inner world helps determine how you experience your outer world. And underneath our everyday conscious thinking is another enormous layer, the subconscious mind. Think of consciousness as an ocean. At the surface are the things you are aware of right now. But underneath the surface are memories, learned behaviors, emotional experiences, and beliefs collected throughout your life. Some are easily accessible, others are buried much deeper, and many of those programs were installed before you were old enough to question them, from parents, teachers, culture, religion, friends, painful experiences, and simply experiences from growing up. So sometimes you consciously want one thing, while another part of you is pulling in the opposite direction. You may say, "I want to change," and something inside you says, "No, this is safer." If you have ever wondered why part of you wants to move forward while another part keeps putting on the brakes, this is one of the reasons, and we will explore this much more deeply in the next videos. For now, I want you to try something very simple. Start observing yourself, not judging. Observing. Notice your thoughts. Notice your emotional reactions. Notice what triggers you. Notice when your mind immediately says, "I can't. That's impossible. People like me don't do that. I'm not good enough." And instead of automatically believing the thought, become curious about it. Ask, where did that come from? Is this really what I believe, or is it something I learned many years ago? This simple act of observation creates a small separation between you and the programming running through your mind. And that small separation can change everything. Because once you can see a program, you no longer have to automatically obey it. This is really what becoming aware of your consciousness means to me. It doesn't mean becoming mystical. It doesn't mean rejecting the physical world. And it certainly doesn't mean pretending that everyday problems don't exist. It simply means beginning to recognize that there may be much more to you than the personality looking back from the mirror. You have a body, you have a brain, you have thoughts, you have emotions, you have beliefs, but behind all of them, there is an awareness experiencing them. And once you begin exploring that awareness, you begin exploring who you really are. In the next video, we will go one step deeper and look at the human mind itself, particularly why the conscious part of you can make a decision, while another part seems determined to do exactly the opposite. That is where things become very interesting. Thank you for watching. And this is just the beginning of the journey. Kookaburra, where knowledge meets inner wisdom.